Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. Recently, there's been an online campaign to convince basketball player LeBron James to boycott the games until there is justice for Tamir Rice. For those of you who have not seen my prior video about Tamir Rice, I will include a card so that you can click that link and watch that video. But Tamir Rice is another young African American boy killed by the police. Another situation where you have no justice. There was a grand jury investigation, and the grand jury decided not to indict the officers who killed this young brother without justification. So people want LeBron James to boycott the games because he's a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers basketball team, and they think that he can use his high profile to force prosecutors to bring federal charges against those officers. And I just wanted to take some time to share my thoughts about the situation. First of all, I don't think that that is the best strategy to use because I think that it's highly unlikely that the Justice Department will actually bring federal charges against these officers. We often get this false sense of hope when they tell us that the Justice Department is investigating something. We think that somehow that means there's going to be some justice. Somehow that means that they're going to swoop in and save the day for us when they are not. They are just going through the motions, and there will be no federal indictment of these officers, unfortunately. So to call on this brother to boycott the games in hopes of the Justice Department doing something, that will achieve nothing in terms of a federal prosecution because the Justice Department, they're not motivated by protests. They look at the facts and they look at the law and they make decisions based on that. And they also probably consider local politics, I'm sure. I'm sure that they're not completely immune from the political process, but they look primarily to the law. They look at whether or not they have sufficient facts to bring a civil rights case against the police officers. They look at the facts to determine whether or not there's a case for violation of Tamir Rice's civil rights. And when we look at the track record of the so-called Justice Department, we can see that they rarely bring about justice in these situations where black boys and men and women and girls are killed by the police. That's just the fact. That's just the reality of the situation. So we should not hold out false hope in that Justice Department. Also, I want to point out this. A boycott would be more understandable if there was bad conduct on the part of the owner of the team. For instance, if you had a Donald Sterling type situation where the owner made some racist statements or had some discriminatory employment practices or treated his workers unfairly, violated some rights of the workers, then a boycott would be justified. A boycott would be justified because the owner would be the one who is at fault. But here, the owner is not at fault. And a boycott would primarily punish the owner and the team and the franchise. It wouldn't necessarily punish the people who failed to prosecute the case against those officers. So for that reason, I wouldn't say that a boycott would be the best strategy in this particular case. Plus, I'm sure that LeBron James has all kinds of contracts worth millions upon millions of dollars, and such a protest would violate the terms of those contracts. And it would subject him to all kinds of liability. So it's easy for someone to sit in the comfort of their home and tweet things out on Twitter, call on someone else to engage in bold action that jeopardizes millions of dollars, it's easier to do that from the comfort of your home, to just put some words and tweet them out. It's far more difficult for somebody to risk all kinds of liability and risk their career and their future on a whim, on something that really is a false hope. The idea that boycotting the game would actually force the Justice Department to do anything. It wouldn't force them to do a damn thing. And a lot of people try to say, well, it worked at the University of Missouri, so it should be able to work on a professional level. Those two situations are completely different. At the University of Missouri, it was about demanding a resignation from someone who actually worked at the institution that they were boycotting against. That's far different from forcing a prosecutor to prosecute a case. It's a different thing. There's a different standard. It's a completely different situation. At the University of Missouri, you had a president who ignored issues of racism on campus, failed to address the problems of racism on campus at that particular university. Here you don't have a situation where the owner of the team has failed to address racial discrimination or racism with respect to the team or the franchise or the institution. It's far easier to force somebody to resign from a position than it is to force prosecutors to bring a case that has to meet certain legal standards. So for that reason, I don't think that it is fair, to demand that this brother boycott games in order to try to do something that probably will not be accomplished to begin with. I think the focus really needs to be more on the state level anyway, and on bringing about legislative change. And I think that is something that LeBron James and other prominent athletes can lend their star power to advocate for legislative change, to deal with the problem of police brutality, to deal with the problem of racial profiling, to deal with the problem that so few of these police are actually prosecuted for killing black people. That problem can be addressed, at least in part, by having a law set up in such a way that whenever there is a police killing, that there be a special prosecutor to prosecute those types of cases, to avoid the issue of conflict of interest, to avoid the issue of these prosecutors being so dependent and so connected to the police. To avoid those issues, there should be a law in place to demand or to require a special prosecutor be appointed in those situations. And that's something that LeBron James can use his star power to support, to lobby for, to speak out for. So I definitely support athletes speaking out, taking a prominent role in today's movement for justice for black people. They definitely have a role to play. And in the past, LeBron James has made statements by wearing t-shirts. For instance, when Eric Garner was killed and there was no justice for that brother, he wore a shirt saying, "Can't breathe." And back when he played with the Miami Heat, that team had a symbolic demonstration in support of Trayvon Martin. So I think that athletes and other famous, wealthy black people can do things like that to contribute to the movement. But I just don't think that a boycott of the games is the most effective strategy at this time. There may be other times where it may be appropriate for people to boycott. But we need to be realistic, and we really need to strategize better. We need to develop a legislative agenda, and we can work with prominent people like a LeBron James to bring attention to that type of agenda and to help enact that type of agenda. So those are the things we need to focus on. Those are just my thoughts. So please rate, comment, and subscribe. Peace.